The world in which the Dark Souls trilogy takes place has a strange, artificial quality to it. I mean, sure, it's a video game. Of course, it's artificial. It was made by artists and coders and level designers. It's not a real place where real people live or real events happen. But there's another layer to it. Characters reveal a wide range of self-awareness, like some of them might know they're living in an illusion. Some openly acknowledge that this world, the one we're in, simply plays by different rules we might not be able to understand at all. When lands outside the areas immediately accessible to the player are referenced, they're murky and light on details. Where exactly is Katarina or Vinheim? What part of the world is the Great Swamp in, and how did someone like Laurentius get from there to Firelink Shrine? It's to the game's credit that they resist the urge to give you a world map that fixes all these locations to an exact longitude and latitude. Those places might not exist. They might just be figments of the characters' imaginations. Out of all the games in the series, none embraces this fakeness more than Dark Souls 2. Much ink has been spilled over some of the more standout examples of this. The elevator in Earthen Peak that connects you to Iron Keep. How Hyde's Tower of Flame seems much farther away from Majula than the short walk there would suggest. You can call this lazy game design, or a winking nod from the developers, but however you interpret it, Dark Souls 2 is chock full of bright, blinking signs pointing to the fact that its own world is nothing more than a collection of props on a stage. Digital assets in a file folder somewhere. The illusion of life where there are only ones and zeros. Not only is this shown in the physical layout of the game's world, but also in conversations you have with NPCs. The Emerald Herald in Majula isn't quite sure what to make of you when you first meet, asking if you are the next monarch or merely a pawn of fate. She straight up gives you a very video gamey quest. Go see the king. But before you see him, you gotta fight some bosses. It's reminiscent of what Gurman says to you in the beginning of Bloodborne.
You're sure to be in a fine haze about now, but don't think too hard about all of this. Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good.
Before even this, though, in the game's opening minutes, you meet 3 old retired firekeepers in a place that their housekeeper calls a limbo, a link between the outside world and the kingdom of Drang Lake. These old women, reminiscent of the fate-weaving Norns in Norse mythology, are where you can respec your character if you have a soul vessel in your possession, something you were unable to do in the first game. From the very beginning of Dark Souls 2, you can warp between bonfires, a gameplay mechanic you only unlocked near the end of Dark Souls 1. Fully half of that game was propelled by this sense that you were forging deeper and deeper into a densely interconnected, living world with little hope of backtracking to friendlier fields. But in Dark Souls 2, you can just magically zip around the levels from the jump. Dark Souls 2 is consistently throwing this idea in your face, signposting it so you pay close attention. This world is false. The Herald, in some of her later dialogue, says that King Vendrick saw the true nature of the soul, for whatever good that did him. When we encounter him later on, in one of the greatest twists in the series, we see that he's gone completely hollow. He's a shambling, barely animated corpse. Whatever he learned about the soul, about its nature, about the world, drove him to this state. He saw the truth, and it broke him. But what is all this in service of? What is the point that Dark Souls 2 is trying to make by repeatedly emphasizing its own cardboard cutout, artificial nature? In Herman Melville's book Moby Dick, there's an entire chapter, chapter 42, about just how white the white whale is. Okay, that's a little reductive. Chapter 42 is more of a meditation on what that color, white, means to the narrator Ishmael, and why this particular aspect of the whale is to him the most frightening part of it. White is a contradictory color, he says. It can stand for purity or power, being an important color in many world religions and empires. the white togas of the Roman senates, the white of a string of perfect pearls, the white of a priest's cassock, and so on. But in other contexts, it's a color that signifies misfortune and fear. Death rides in on a pale horse, a white squall on the horizon can sink a ship. The white albatross in Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, landing on the mast signaling an ill omen for the sailors on board. But that's not why the whiteness of the whale scares him. It's deeper than that. Whiteness, he says, by its indefiniteness, shadows forth the heartless voids and immensities of the universe. The color white is a sign of the true nature of the universe, a nature that is utterly alien and uncaring when it comes to human life. Deep down, we know this, he says. We understand that the world is a place of unfeeling cruelty, a naked contest of power where only the fittest survive. And to survive with our sanity intact, we have to throw a bright, beautiful coat of paint over the universe and insist that things like love, warmth, friendship, family, glory, passion, and honor are real, when in fact they're simply a layer of pleasant unreality over the top of an unthinkable truth. The universe doesn't care how much you loved your family. It doesn't care if you died an honorable, glorious death or lived life as a coward. We all end up in the same grave, don't we? Everything we place such great importance on crumbles away in this unblinking, bleached bone white face of the universe. This is a truth that can only be glanced at briefly. Melville says people run the risk of being driven insane if they look at it for too long, the same way a man can go snowblind. Like willful travelers in Lapland who refuse to wear colored or coloring glasses upon their eyes, so the wretched infidel gazes himself blind at the monumental white shroud that wraps all the prospect around him. In this way, Ahab's quest against the whale takes on mythic proportions. He is not simply seeking revenge against an animal that maimed him. He's rebelling against the very nature of life itself, asserting his own significance and right to exist by sheer force of will. About midway through Dark Souls 2, you meet a character named Aldia. Aldia is the brother of King Vendrick and a scholar. During your first conversation, he tells you that you have two choices: to either inherit the order of the world or destroy it. That, he says, is the only true choice that a king has to make. Just before meeting Vendrick in his crypt, Aldia speaks to us again. He talks in riddles, giving cryptic hints and urging us along our path, but never plainly stating what it is he wants for us or from us. In one line of dialogue, he says,
"Life is brilliant, beautiful. It enchants us to the point of obsession."
Before turning around and saying,
"Men are props in a state of life, and no matter how tender, how exquisite, the lie will remain a lie."
Through Aldia, the game points purposefully towards its own fakeness, and at the same time forces the player to face an existential question.
All men trust fully the illusion of life. But is this so wrong? A construction, a facade, and yet a world full of warmth and resplendence. Young Hollow, are you intent on shattering the yoke, spoiling this wonderful falsehood?
Exposure to this wonderful falsehood, this idea that what we think is real might just be an illusion, can provoke a range of responses. Where this idea produces terror and insanity for Ishmael, another character from a separate but just as mythic work of American fiction has a different response. Judge Holden from Cormac McCarthy's novel Blood Meridian is a man who not only thinks he understands the primordial, vicious nature of the world, he wholeheartedly embraces it and teaches others to do the same. The book is a semi-fictionalized account of a real campaign of terror and violence waged on the US-Mexico border in the 19th century by quasi-legal bands of hired guns against both the Native American population and Mexicans living in the contested borderlands. The judge thrives in this environment of slaughter and bloodshed. Not only that, he sees himself as an enlightening figure, a warped reflection of Jesus or Buddha, a man who is simply sharing the true and correct way of life to his band of scalp-hunting disciples. In the middle of the novel, the author recounts a dream that the protagonist, simply named the Kid, has about the judge. In it, the judge stands by a man striking coins at a cold forge. On the coin is a graven image of the judge's face. The judge takes each coin, inspects it, and then throws it away and commands the forger to strike another, and then another, and then another, and the night never ends. What is meant by this image, and why did McCarthy choose to include it in the narrative? I think it's to show that the judge's answer to Aldia's question would have been a resounding yes, because the coin is an illusion. Money, politics, markets, nations, families, businesses, all of these things to the judge are that layer of unreality over the top of the real way of things. His perfect world is what the philosopher Thomas Hobbes called the state of nature, a war of all against all in which there is no morality, philosophy, or civilization. To Hobbes, this was a horrifying prospect. Every moral thinking person should dedicate their life to preventing humanity from backsliding into this state, according to him. Things like laws, religion, education, and culture are defenses against our violent, animalistic origins. But to the judge, there is no other real, honest world than a world of bloodshed and war. It's how we sort things out, how power changes hands fairly, how the clock of the universe ticks on. Anything else might sound nice on the surface, but it's a lie, a wonderful falsehood. There's more than a little of the judge's philosophy in Dark Souls 2. How do you become the next monarch? By fighting and killing increasingly vicious foes, absorbing their strength on a quest for more and more power, until you sit on that final throne, having earned your place through a fair contest of power against power. And someday, someone will challenge you for that throne too. And if they defeat you, then you never really deserved to have it in the first place, did you? Truth and misery, or the comfort of a lie. That tension, which is at the heart of Dark Souls 2, is explored by American writer Thomas Ligotti at length in his book The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. And his conclusions are less than sunny. If truth is what you seek, he says, then the examined life will only take you on a long ride to the limits of solitude and leave you on the side of the road with your truth and nothing else. To Ligotti, human consciousness is a sort of cosmic joke. Human beings alone are aware on a level that no other organism is. And it's his argument that this awareness was a mistake, that it only brings us suffering. But, on the other hand, when you bring this up to people at, say, a dinner party and proclaim that all of humanity should stop reproducing and hold hands and walk together into oblivion, actively participating in our own mass extinction level event, you're going to get some odd looks, to say the very least.
Just want you to stop saying odd shit.
If that last line sounds familiar, it's because Nick Pizzolatto, writer of the first season of the HBO series True Detective, borrowed quite liberally from Ligotti when writing the character of Rust Cole. The ethics of this sort of borrowing aside, the character dynamic between detectives Cole and Hart illustrates the fundamental tension in Aldia's question. Cole is intent on shattering the wonderful falsehood, but Hart is so invested in the illusion of life and personhood in his own ego that Cole's philosophical ramblings sound like a provocation. Because they are. This question, Aldia's question, gets to the heart of things that people hold most dear. Family, love, religion, spirituality, morals, purpose. If you aim at these things and try to show that the emperor has no clothes, don't be surprised if people get upset with you. That's not to say you shouldn't ask it, though. After all, everyone from Hobbes to Melville asks it, If philosophers and writers and thinkers the world over seem to come back to it again and again, it must be worth asking and worth answering. So, how does Dark Souls 2 answer this question? Well, it answers it by not answering it. There's no cutscene at the end of the game telling you that you made the right choice. There is a canon ending, more or less, since we have Dark Souls 3. It seems that in the universe of the games, the protagonist of Dark Souls 2 decided to rekindle the flame, but that choice is left up to the player. And that's how it is in life as well. I can't give you a neat and tidy solution to this question. I don't think anyone can. And if somebody says they have all the answers, that's usually a red flag. Thank you for watching.